Selamat siang, good afternoon, and welcome back to another Bali COVID-19 update. My name is Bruce, and this is February 20th, 2022. And for those of you who have been sending me messages about getting better, thank you very much. I am, but I'm still a little under the weather, but much better than last week, thanks. And what's the weather like today? It is yuck. It was just raining, huge downpour just came up out of nowhere. Right now, the temperature is 31.3 degrees Celsius and humidity 68% and wind speed 10 kilometers per hour. The two main stories today are not about COVID-19 again, but about opening up Bali. And so first one is about a possibility of getting rid of the quarantine in March. And the second one is about some new airlines coming in. And as usual, if you are Australian, you'll probably be amused to see JetStar on that list. And of course, segments on Omicron variant, both here and in other parts of Asia. So as I said, I'm getting better, but I'm still sleepy. I took a bunch of medicine just a little while ago. So we're gonna make this ending short here. Let's take a look at the numbers. Okay, numbers nationwide are pretty stable. 59,384 new cases. Okay, so we've been up in that figure now for a number of days. It's not going down, but it's not going up either. And so I guess that's good news. And recoveries, 34,699. And deaths, 158. So all these numbers are pretty stable. Does that mean that we have hit the peak and now we're just waiting to go down? I hope so. We'll just have to wait and see, as I always say. And what about the numbers in Bali? Numbers in Bali, a little better news for us. New cases, 939. Okay, so we're back under 1,000. Good news. And recoveries, 1,573. So more recoveries than new cases. Again, good news. Deaths is kind of disturbing, 20 deaths. No information on why those deaths occurred, if they're, well, people like me, old people with comorbidities. I don't know, but the death number is not good. But the new cases and recoveries, good news there. Now, as I've said before, and I've heard from a lot of people in the comments in the last couple of videos, saying the same thing. Everybody is sick around me, but they aren't getting tested. Right, and so there's not a push from individuals to get tested. Why? A variety of reasons. As we've talked about before, they don't want to go into isolation. They want to keep working. They don't have any money to get tested. Their family doesn't want them to get tested. They don't believe in the Omicron variant. There are just so many different reasons. Okay, so numbers slightly encouraging, not discouraging. And so let's go on to the first story. Bali wants to get rid of the quarantine in March. Is that going to happen? Let's see. So the quarantine has gone down to 3 days now if you're fully vaxxed and have a booster shot. But it could go down even more, and I talked about this in the last video just a little bit. So what about getting down to 0? Bali wants to remove quarantine for tourists starting in March. Wow. Bali Governor Wayan Koster plans to remove quarantine for tourists visiting Bali in March. According to him, the Omicron variant has been controlled. He said, "I've tried the quarantine period, which was originally 7 days, reduced to 5 days, and as of today, it's become 3 days. And my plan, if possible, in early March, it will be without quarantine." Of course, this has to be done by the central government. Even without the quarantine, tourists will have to undergo a PCR test upon departure and upon arrival, and the results of the PCR test will be shown at the hotel where you're staying. And so what's going to make a decision about if the quarantine is going to be lifted or not? Well, according to this article, it is based on what happens with the COVID-19 cases, which at this point are fairly steady. The governor hopes that cases in Bali will continue to decline. He said, "Now it's decreased somewhat and we still have 2 weeks Hopefully, it will decline and stabilize. The governor said 90% of cases of Omicron variant were asymptomatic or were mild symptoms, and less than 10% of patients with the Omicron variant have been admitted to the hospital. And the recovery on the average for those without symptoms is under 5 days. So he said that's fast. What does it mean? It means the risk of transmission can be controlled. The transmission is not too dangerous. Okay, well, transmission is going like mad here from what I'm seeing. My whole family has it. It sounds like just about everybody else in Bali has had it, or is getting it. So maybe the governor means that transmission is not too dangerous in that people aren't dying in large numbers or being hospitalized in large numbers. And for vaccinations, according to this article, for people 12 years and over, the first injection has reached 105%, second vaccine reached 94%, and the first injection of elderlies reached 84%, and the second 74%. Vaccinations for children ages 6 to 11, first vaccination 105%, second vaccination 90%. So the governor said from a vaccination perspective in Bali, it's reached high enough levels so that it's relatively safe against COVID-19 transmission. So the governor said from a vaccination perspective in Bali, it's reached high enough levels so that it's relatively safe against COVID-19 transmission. You can transmit the virus even if you have been vaccinated. I'm not sure what the governor is saying here. So he continued, the pattern is that we see less than 10% of those who enter the hospital are recovering quickly. Those with OTG are also 90% of them recover quickly. So from this pattern, I see that there's nothing to worry about. Don't worry, be happy, Bali's slogan. Therefore, although the current case of the Omicron variant is high, the governor appealed to the public not to panic. Nobody is panicking, I keep saying, except the government, it seems, and maybe some rich people in Java. But still obey the health protocols. And is that happening? My wife just came back from the market just a few minutes ago, and was anything being tested? Zero. Nothing. No temperature test, no PL, zero. So are the health protocols being followed up? No, they aren't. The governor said, as much as possible, we should avoid large crowds of people who are at risk of transmitting COVID-19. But will things go to zero in March? Wow, I hope so. That would be great. There's still going to be the problem of the visa, however, and well, we're going to talk about that later. And our second main story today, Scoot JetStar KLM Royal Dutch to reopen routes to Bali. Good news. So there are 3 more airlines that are signing up to come to Bali. According to President Director of State Airport Operator Angkasa Pura I Fakfami, this is a positive sign of international airlines and tourists' trust to fly and visit Bali. So based on these reports, KLM will operate 4 flights a week with the route from Singapore to Denpasar. They'll be using a Boeing B777 aircraft with a capacity of 408 seats. Scoot Tiger Air will operate 3 flights a week with the same route, Singapore-Denpasar, using the Airbus A320 that has a capacity of 108 passengers. And then there's JetStar, right? JetStar, is JetStar actually going to make it? So according to this article, JetStar Airways will operate 3 flights a week with the routes Singapore-Denpasar, Sydney-Denpasar, and Melbourne-Denpasar. For Singapore-Denpasar, they'll use the Airbus A320 with a capacity of 180. For the Singapore-Denpasar route, they'll use the Airbus A320 with a capacity of 180 passengers. Anybody see a mistake that was just made somewhere there? If you do, let me know. As for Sydney-Denpasar and Melbourne-Denpasar routes, JetStar will be using a Boeing 788 with 335 passenger seats. They also prepared Airbus A321, A320 aircraft with 323 or 186 seats, depending on demand, I guess. Angkasa Pura I will continue to implement the strict health protocols and make sure that the operations of all airlines landing at Ngurah Rai will be abiding by the applicable regulations. And currently there are only 2 airlines serving Bali internationally right now, Garuda Indonesia and Singapore Airlines. Okay, so good news with more airlines. And the governor of Bali is upset, and for good reason. Governor says there's a mafia visa in quarantine in Bali. Wow. I think the governor's been listening to some complaints. So Governor Coster complained to Pac Santiago Uno about an alleged visa mafia and quarantine mafia. According to Pac Coster, these two mafia actions have damaged the image of Bali's tourism, which is currently just starting to grow and rise when many direct flights from various countries are beginning to arrive. The governor explained that there are many hotels in Bali that are designated quarantine hotels and charge fees beyond the normal price. The price per room that has been published to guests, then added again with the excuse that it's a quarantine hotel. So if you've been following this, you know that you can go and you look down the list, and it's down here, and you can find a quarantine hotel, and you find some prices for most of them, not all of them. The last time I looked, a lot of them had their prices up there. But then you get there and they say, oh, some of them, according to the governor, say, oh, sorry, that's going to be an extra 500,000 rupees per night because this is a quarantine hotel. The governor said they charge guests up to 500,000 rupiah per room per day. The reason is because it's a quarantine fee. According to him, there are 27 hotels designated as quarantine places to do this. And for Coster, this is very difficult for tourists. He said tourists come in, they just want to have fun. And then they get here and bang, they get hit with something like this. And he calls it the harsh reality and damage to Bali's image as a place for tourism. I haven't seen anything in social media about this, but if the governor is addressing this, there's been some complaints somewhere, and I just haven't seen them. And so that's the quarantine mafia. What about the visa mafia? Well, the governor said that the normal price for a visa is 1.5 million or even 1 million rupees, but some travel agents' price was increased. The increase doesn't make sense either. The travel person clearly conveys the mark up prices with reasons to speed up the visa process and the like. He said there it is stated that for a smooth process you have to pay 3.5 million rupiah. If you want an express, you have to pay 4.2 million. If you want super express, you have to pay 5.5 million. And I've seen all of these prices quoted. This makes it difficult for foreigners to come to Bali, he said. And the governor even mentioned the initials of a travel agent who took care of the visa. The name has been pocketed and has been reported to related parties, especially the Ministry of Law and Human Rights. Oh boy, better watch out. So how will this work out? Will prices for visas come down? And as I mentioned in another segment, will we go back to VOAs again? No telling. Things change quickly, and let's see what happens on Monday night. And what about Omicron in Indonesia? Omicron cases continue to surge, Covid-19 task force explains. So government spokesperson, our friend Pak Wiku, who we've heard from many times, explained why Omicron cases in Indonesia continue to surge up to 200% compared to the onset of the pandemic, while global cases have begun to decline by 60%. Pak Wiku said that the contradictory situation occurred because Indonesia imposed a quarantine policy as well as entry and exit tests for travelers since the beginning of the case spike. Indonesia succeeded in delaying the importation of cases longer than other countries, he said. According to Wiku, several countries that have managed to pass the peak of cases and drop virus transmission include the United States, Canada, and Australia. Meanwhile, Asian countries that have experienced a surge in cases besides Indonesia are Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Hong Kong, Korea. However, he noted Japan and the Philippines have seen a decline in cases. And Pak Luhut claimed that Jakarta had passed the peak of the Omicron wave a few days ago and would see declining number of cases. Let's hope Pak Luhut is right. And so our cases have remained fairly stable, mid-50s to mid-60s. And in Bali 2 days ago, our numbers were down to 1,000, which is good news. Are we over the surge in Bali? Well, with everybody sick here and a lot of people not getting tested, it's hard to say. What's happening around Indonesia with COVID? Bogor City Hospital prepares emergency tents to anticipate COVID patient surge. That is not good. I remember the tents from the battle days with the Delta. According to the Bogor City Hospital head of media relations, Pak Andy, he said 54.6% of COVID isolation beds are in use right now, and 83 people are occupying 152 special beds for COVID patients. As the number of new infections rise, the number of people in Bogor City who died from COVID-19 also rose in the last 2 weeks. In Bogor General Hospital, 5 COVID patients died recently. So far this year, the hospital has recorded 11 COVID deaths, 3 of whom had not been vaccinated, which means 8 were vaccinated and they died. No information on how old they were, if they had comorbidities, so let's not panic. They're getting ready for a surge in Bogor in hospitalizations, and hopefully that will not come about. More on coronavirus in Indonesia, and this is a weird one. Government concerned about Karanganyar's regent's call to ignore COVID-19. Yes, a regent has been saying this. And we hear from Pak Wiku again in this segment. He addressed the controversial remarks from the regent. And a video of the regent giving his speech without wearing a mask at a wedding has gained traction on social media platforms and going viral. According to Pak Wiku, it's regrettable that such a statement can come out of a public figure and leader who should be known for their wisdom. This is feared to spike similar acts from more people, he said. Pak Wiku believes that a large segment of the population believes whatever a leader tells them to do in Indonesia. The clip from the regent's speech that has been moving around the social media shows him standing among guests at the wedding and spoke in Javanese, urging people to look out for themselves and disregard the existence of the Omicron virus and COVID-19 in general. Great. The regent said that people exposed to Omicron would either have mild symptoms or no symptoms, and he appealed to the public not to take tests when they get symptoms. He, however, did urge people to wear masks, but only for the sake of not violating health protocols set out by health agencies. And so we have one of the leaders telling people, forget it, don't worry about this stuff. Will there be any sanctions on him for this? What can the president do, for example, or Pak Luhut? This is not a good sign, because there's already a growing segment of the population who thinks that Omicron is nothing, not to be worried about, or that the pandemic is over, or that the pandemic actually never even existed. So a lot of misinformation, disinformation spreading, and this kind of stuff from a political leader is only going to fuel the fire. And what's happening around Southeast Asia? Vietnam to resume international tourism in March. Okay, everybody is getting in on it. The Vietnamese government agreed on Wednesday, the 16th, a few days ago, to open borders for international tourism starting on March 15th. The Deputy Prime Minister has requested competent authorities to urgently announce a detailed reopening plan for localities nationwide, as well as to propose a visa issuance policy for international arrivals. And that's what we need here, some new visa policies. At a meeting held this past Tuesday, the Tourism, Health, Foreign Affairs, and Transport Ministries proposed that the government resume the unilateral visa exemption policy for 13 countries and bilateral visa exemption regime for 88 countries and regions as prior to the pandemic. According to a proposal, foreign tourists arriving in Vietnam will no longer need to book tour packages with designated travel agents as per the ongoing vaccine passport trial program launched in November. Nearly 9,000 foreign arrivals have been welcomed under this program as of February 10th. International guests aged 12 and over must prove that they've been fully vaccinated or recovered from COVID-19 and show a negative test result as per requirements by local health authorities. Under the proposal, international tourists are also required to pay $30 per person on average to enjoy the insurance benefits worth $10,000 for COVID-19 treatment in Vietnam. And so you're going to pay them when you get there, and you will be given insurance up to $10,000 if you end up with COVID-19 and you're treated in Vietnam. So another place to visit in Southeast Asia starting in the middle of March. And what about Thailand? Government needs to lift all COVID curbs. Various tourism business operators in the south and the east, as well as the Thai Hotels Association, are calling on the government to fully reopen the country for international tourists by lifting all remaining COVID-19 restrictions from next month. They sent an open letter to the Prime Minister and other officials where they said the government should declare COVID-19 an endemic and lift all restrictions, including the Thailand pass and post-arrival coronavirus testing requirements for international tourists. The group said in the letter, Thailand needs to further relax COVID-19 restrictions for tourists now, or else it may lose the ability to compete with other nations. And they mentioned places like Vietnam and Japan. Japan? I don't think tourists are going to Japan now. Vietnam? Well, Vietnam's opening. And there's the Philippines, for example, who canceled their post-arrival COVID-19 tests that were previously imposed on international visitors. And April is going to be an important month for Thailand's tourism industry, as Western tourists usually like to travel to the kingdom during the Easter holidays. And Songkran usually attracts a huge number of foreign visitors because they like being squirted with water, I guess. The letter calls on the government to cancel its policy to conduct repeated PCR tests on foreign tourists during the first and fifth days of their stay in the country. On February 1st, the CCSA, talked about that many times, began relaxing the country's COVID-19 restrictions for visitors arriving under the Test and Go scheme by lifting the mandatory quarantine period and shifting to the test. However, to enter Thailand under this scheme, tourists must book a hotel room for their fifth-day testing ahead of their travel. According to the tourism associations, the number of COVID-19 infections found during the second PCR test was lower when compared with infections found among the local population. And that, I think, is what we're going to see here, too. We're infecting ourselves here. It's not tourists coming in, or I don't think it's going to be tourists coming in that are going to be the problem. We're the problem here. We're spreading it. Citing figures compiled in Phuket from February 1st to Sunday, these associations said the infection rate among post-arrival tests was 2.17%, while the rate of infection found in second test was 3.55%. Still, they said, these infected tourists have apparently not caused any burden to the country's healthcare system, as their infection rate is very close to that of common flu. All the foreign tourists who tested positive either showed no symptoms or mild symptoms, according to the letter. And so, is Thailand going to do away with the PCR tests too? So it seems that countries in Southeast Asia are competing with each other to see what they can get rid of in order to attract more tourists. Like in the main story, the governor is already pushing to get rid of the quarantine starting in March, and there are groups here pushing to bring back the VOA in order to make it easier and more attractive for tourists to come to Indonesia and especially to Bali. Is that going to happen in the coming weeks? I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. Okay, and let's follow up on the first flight. I said I would follow it up. I just mentioned it in the last one, even though it was the lead article, there was really nothing there to say. Singapore Airlines brings 112 foreign tourists to Bali. Here are the details. So according to the head of the Office of the Ministry of Law and Human Rights, Pak Jamaruli, he said that the plane brought a crew of 13 people, 9 Singaporeans and 4 Malaysians, and passengers numbered 159, consisting of 47 Indonesian citizens and 112 foreigners. He said that 82 foreigners came using the B211 visa, 28 came with a Kitas, and 2 with APEC business travel cards. Okay, so now the B211s are coming in. So we got tourist people coming in actually into Bali on Singapore Airlines. And, well, there are 82 of them. Good. Pak Jamaruli hopes that the arrival of the international flight can boost the economy of the Balinese people who've been injured for a long time due to the COVID-19 pandemic. He added, as you always hear, we also hope that foreigners who come to Bali will strictly observe health protocols. And I hope so, and I hope that locals will too. And so what if we get down to where the quarantine is gone? Will that increase people coming? There's still going to be a big problem, and the big problem is visas, and that's the next story. After direct flights to Bali, tourism actors asked for VOA implementation. According to Wayan Suwena, President Director of Indonesian Impression Tour, he said that just going down to no quarantine will not have a significant impact on the amount of tourists coming into Bali. He said that in addition to that, there needs to be a re-implementation of the free visa on arrival, the VOA, and a decrease in the value of insurance claims owed by tourists in addition to the quarantine exemptions when entering Bali. He said, I'm sure it will attract tourists back to Bali in the short term. If this is ignored by the central government, more and more Balinese people's assets engaged in the tourism industry will be owned by non-Balinese people. That means those people who've been buying up things that Balinese have been selling in order to get money to live on, right? Like hotels and villas and all of that. And who's been buying those things up? People from other islands, foreigners as well, all at the detriment to local owners. And so is that going to happen? Are we going to get down to no quarantine and the VOA again? In other words, getting back to the old days? I don't know. It's a distinct possibility with the direction the government's been taking recently. We'll just have to wait and see. And what about news in Buleleng? Now, this is a story that I went over and I ran this through Google Translate first, and then I wasn't sure about the translation, and so I went back and translated it myself, and I came up with the same thing. And so I'm guessing this is what this is. Note, council asked to restrict modern network stores in Buleleng. I'm guessing based on the content of the article that they're talking about things like Alpha Mart, Mini Marts, Indomart, all of those. There's a lot of them around. Those are what I think they're talking about when they talk about modern network stores. So the Buleleng Regional People's Representative Council, DPRD, has urged the government, Buleleng Regency government, to limit the issuance of permits for networked modern stores. And you know, they spread here like rabbits. Unfortunately, the current government can't do much because modern network store licenses are now widely issued through the Investment Coordinating Board, BKPM, at the center. Because modern network store licenses are now more widely issued through the Investment Coordinating Board, BKPM, at the center. Member of Commission 1 DPRD Buleleng, Yoman Bujana, said the existence of modern network stores is starting to become a worry because these shops enter remote villages, and he's worried that the existence of the modern chain stores will actually kill traditional markets. Pak Bujana said if it spreads to villages, then disrupts traditional markets, we are worried that this will trigger social impacts. We ask that the government be sensitive to this issue, and that is a problem. You probably know, if you've watched this channel before, my wife has a little shop down in her house, and we have a Alpha Mart not too far from here that opened, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 months ago. It's hard to remember how long ago it was. And a lot of local people go there because, well, it's got more of a range of goods than she has here. And it's centrally located because they can pay their rents over on Jalan Erlangga. And so it's competition for local shops. And so these networked stores, I guess we call them, are competition for the local shops. According to Pak Bujana, there are now concerns in rural communities. Grocery traders and small stores are worried about losing buyers, especially when there were fluctuations in oil prices a few weeks ago. And Pak Bujana said that the protection of traditional markets, of Buleleng Regency Regulation number 10, does not actually work optimally. The regulation regulates the distance between traditional markets and networked modern stores. So the local regulation states that modern shops must be at least 500 meters away from traditional markets. Wow. Okay, I have not seen that happening. Meanwhile, the distance between modern network stores is at least 100 meters. An example, in Sangsit, opposite the traditional market, there's a modern shop. Less than 200 meters away, there's another modern shop. So he said, we hope the government will take firm steps. If the permit expires, do not extend it. However, the head of the one-stop integrated licensing and investment services in Buleleng, Made Kutha, said that over the last 2 years, they have not issued any permits for modern network stores. But these stores get their permits through the online submission system. Okay, all of this is beyond me. I'm not interested in that part of this story. I'm interested in how the modern network stores, or the mini markets, as I think we can call them, how they impact local people. And so this is something that is not going to go away. What about some education news in Bali? Sad. Karangasem crisis, hundreds of elementary and middle school teachers. What is a crisis? They're short teachers. How many? 705 teachers Karangasem is short. Yes. The head of the Karangasem Education, Youth and Sports Agency, Wayan Sutrisna, said that the shortage of teachers in Karangasem has been going on for a long time. Most of the needs are at junior high school level, a total of 413 teachers. And for elementary school, Karangasem still lacks 292 teachers. Wow. How could they be short that many teachers? Pak Sutrisna said, at most elementary schools we lack classroom teachers, while in junior high schools there's less ICT teachers. In addition to ICT teachers, there are also PE teachers that they need, and Hindu religious teachers, religion teachers, citizen education teachers, Indonesian language teachers, counseling. Wow. Well, they're short just about everything, it seems like. And so this is not good. Is there a shortage of teachers in Indonesia? Why is Karangasem missing all these teachers? What about other regencies in Bali? Are they short teachers as well? This would be something I'd like to know. And so Karangasem is hoping that there will be help from the regent and, well, probably the regional government as well. And more on education. Well, kind of education. And it's education in the sense of kids are not in school, and so what are they going to get up to? A lot of times they get up to things that aren't particularly good. Bali PTM stopped. Bali PTM stopped student groups convoy in Denpasar. The PTM is face-to-face learning. So face-to-face learning in Bali, as you know, has been temporarily suspended to prevent community activities from spreading COVID-19, but it's okay for them to be out in the street with each other. This is just a ridiculous situation. However, instead of isolating in home or staying away from group activities that could spread COVID-19, kids are getting together and groups of students are carrying out motorcycle convoys in Denpasar. The Denpasar police chief said that his party received information from the public that there were groups of teenagers totaling approximately 100 motorbikes. They passed, and the convoy from the direction of Topati headed for Jalan Bypass Nur Rai in Sanur this past week. The group of teenagers, most of whom are underage, disrupted traffic flow and the surrounding communities. Great. So based on calls from the community, the police went in and they arrested groups of people, groups of children at the Sanur GBB intersection. A group of children was divided into two groups. Some of them went to Denpasar on Jalan Sudirman, and they were successfully blocked by the police at Tuku Umar, and 3 motorbikes were seized. 3, that's all. Another group headed to Jalan Raya Sisatan, which is where I used to live for a while. Some of them entered resident villages, although in the end they were arrested by a joint Denpasar police team. The police, with the help of residents, also helped secure the teenagers in the Sisatan housing estate. In Denpasar, 8 motorcycles were seized by officers there. A total of 18 children, some of whom were underage, were also arrested. Police are still hunting for the rest of the teenagers, and according to the chief, anyone don't try to disturb security. I will stand firm and take firm action with the help of the relevant agencies to dissolve all those who disturb the area of Denpasar and make Bali the center of worldview. Dozens of juveniles who were arrested underwent examination, and their parents were called. The chairman of the Denpasar Traditional Village Council, Anakagung Sudiana, fully supports the action taken by the police to crack down on young people who disturb Denpasar security. And so, this is what you get. You let kids loose, and what? Some of them are going to get into trouble. Hey, that's part of being a teenager. Doesn't make any difference if you're in Bali or in the US or in Australia or where. You set some kids loose and they got nothing to do, and they're going to find some ways to get in trouble. So what's a good way to solve this? Open up the schools. And here's another Bali story, and a bizarre one. Wow, this one, well, this has been reported in the local press and gone viral on social media. Because it's pretty bizarre. Owner of DK305AD, where are you? A late model 2019 white Honda HR-V with license plate DK305AD has been abandoned in the parking area at the domestic terminal since the 29th of November 2020. How do you abandon a car there? Over the past 15 months, the vehicle has incurred parking fees and fines amounting to 50 million rupiah. Okay, I don't get this story, because if you've got a car here, why don't they report it to the police? They've got the license plate number. They should be able to track down the owner easily enough. Stakeholder Relation Manager of Angkasa Pura I, Pak Yudhistira, I've talked about him before, confirmed reports of abandoned car and the resulting money due to the parking lot authority. He said that the car entered the airport on the 29th of November and has not moved since then. The car's body is now covered with dust accumulated over the last 15 months. This just seems so bizarre. He explained that the abandoned vehicle parked for extended periods at the airport represents a not infrequent occurrence. In the past, he said, there were cases where a BMW sedan was left at the airport for 4 years and 79 motorcycles left unclaimed in the parking area. Now, I can understand the motorcycles because you get foreigners who come in and they rent a motorcycle and they drive it to the airport and they just leave it there because they're irresponsible. Well, that's happened a lot, and back when we had tourists here, you would see people complaining, does anybody know where this person is because they've got my motorbike? And those motorbikes probably ended up a lot of the time at the airport because they take them there so that they don't have to pay any extra fees. So they're ripping the people off. Now, I don't know, how could you leave a BMW at the airport for 4 years? What is that about? Boy, these are some fascinating stories and pretty weird. Well, if that's your Honda, you can get it back for just 50 million rupees. It's good to have some stories to laugh about. And some more on Buleleng. Buleleng Cakra Nanggala team spreads information about COVID-19 through mobile broadcast, and I've heard these. The team, consisting of elements from Codem 1609, Buleleng Police, Buleleng Transportation Agency, Buleleng Sapol PP, Buleleng Discominfosanti, and Buleleng BPBD have worked together in fighting the spread of COVID-19. According to Pak Ketut Swarmawan, who I've talked about many times, the coordinator for data and information sector of the Buleleng COVID-19 task force, this activity aims to provide understanding regarding the implementation of centralized isolation, ISOTER, PPKM Level 3, and booster vaccinations in Buleleng Regency. Don't be afraid for people who feel exposed to the COVID-19 virus. It's better to undergo treatment at ISOTER and raise awareness again about the importance of protocols, health, considering that new confirmations have only occurred this week. He further explained, in addition to broadcasting along the road, the team also educates public about handling COVID-19 in market areas and other public areas, as well as supervising and reminding the public directly regarding health protocols. I think they missed the main market here in Singaraja because nobody's checking anything still there. But I have heard these roving broadcasts. Okay, that's it. Time for an update and a wrap-up. Updates, no updates. Thank goodness. And wrap-up, really short wrap-up today. So will the quarantine be lifted starting in March? No telling. That's not up to the governor, that's up to Jakarta. They have to make that decision, and so we'll just have to wait and see. So are we going to go back to the visa on arrival, the VOA? Could be. People are calling for that. Is that going to happen right now? I don't know. You can't make any guesses anymore because the government just kind of surprises you all the time now. Well, they've been surprising me all the time for the last couple of years since the pandemic started. Will that help? Yes, if there's no quarantine and if you could get a VOA, yeah, that's definitely going to help. Cooking video today is on pepes, ikan pepes, and it's up here. If you found this video helpful, useful, amusing, non-irritating, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. I update these videos on Wednesday and Sunday, and there's a cooking video every Sunday. Thanks for viewing. Be kind to somebody today. Stay safe, and I will see you on Wednesday.